And we can make this habit of glossing it over like, Jesus died for the forgiveness of my sins, for me and for you. But do you know what historically and scientifically happened to him? First, the Romans, they stripped Jesus and they tied his hands to a wood post above his head. And then they took a whip that was made of leather that had pieces of bone and lead embedded near the ends. And two men would do what they called flogging. And they would take turns whipping Jesus again and again and again. And each time this heavy whip is brought down with the full force across Jesus' shoulders and back and legs. And at first it would just cut through Jesus' skin. But then as the blows continued, they cut deeper into his tissues and the underlying muscles. And after all of that, Jesus' skin was hanging like ribbons from his back, so much so that the entire area was just this unrecognizable mass of torn, bleeding tissue. But that wasn't it. Then they took a crown, which was made of thorns of a prickly plant, and they pressed it into his scalp. And in addition to the pain, there would have been a lot of bleeding because the scalp is one of the most vascular areas of the body. But that wasn't it. The mocking was followed by further physical violence where they would hit Jesus over the head with the staff that drove the thorns deeper into Jesus' scalp and caused even more profuse bleeding. Oh, but that wasn't it either. After all the beatings, Jesus was then forced to carry the heavy wooden horizontal piece of the cross to his place of execution. As Scripture tells us that Jesus started out carrying the cross, but it proved to be too heavy that he fell 3 separate times. Could you even imagine the pain caused by carrying this rough, heavy wooden beam as it's pressing into the torn, open skin and muscles of Jesus' shoulders? That wasn't it. Upon getting to Golgotha, where Jesus was to be crucified, they hammered heavy square nails through Jesus' wrists. And they had to hit it enough times to make sure that it would go deep enough into the wood so that he wouldn't fall. And then they lifted the cross into place. And then after they nailed Jesus' wrists, they put Jesus' feet 1 foot over the other, with both feet extended and toes down, and a nail would be driven through the arch of both feet. This is the crucifixion. That wasn't it. As Jesus' body was getting even more tired and weak, he was slowly sagged down, applying more weight on the nails in his wrists, which would send excruciating pain shooting throughout his body because the nails and the wrists were putting pressure on what's known as the median nerves. And if he wanted to relieve himself from that pain, he would have to push himself up by placing his full weight on the nail through his feet. Again, Jesus feels the agony of the nail tearing through the nerves between the metatarsal bones of the feet. And every time he lifted himself to catch a breath, his torn open, raw back would be rubbing against that wooden cross. But that wasn't it either. As his arms grow tired, what was left of his muscles would begin to cramp. And because of the cramps, Jesus would lose the ability to push himself upward to breathe, which means air could be drawn into the lungs but not exhaled. Jesus would fight to raise himself in order to get even one small breath as he was slowly suffocating. Hours of limitless pain, and it's almost over. The loss of tissue fluids would reach a critical level, making the heart struggle to pump blood into the tissues. And then his tortured lungs would make a frantic effort to gasp small breaths of air. And Jesus could probably feel the chill of death coming over him. His mission of atonement had been completed, and his body would then die. This might not be your bow-wrapped candy cane baby born in a manger Christmas message that you might have hoped for, but I want you to see that the birth of Jesus means absolutely nothing without the death and resurrection of Jesus. If it wasn't for that, he would have just been another baby being born, but it was his birth that was the beginning of the greatest love story ever to be told. What kind of king would step down off of his throne, not only to die, but to be brutally murdered, while knowing that some, dare I say most of us, were going to reject him anyway? And Jesus didn't just die for the Christians. He died for all of humanity. And so if you're here today and you haven't given a thought to being a Christian, he still died for you in hopes that one day you would truly follow him. And not because he has some big ego and he needs to build up his following, but because he knows that through him, you will find whatever you're looking for in this life and the next. This is what Jesus did for you.